Assalamu alaikum. As you can see, lesson number 8. And today what we're trying to do is look at and focus on these three things here, 1, 2 and 3, is how to preserve your acts of worship and be balanced in them, and so that they will be accepted and blessed by Allah. And if there is time, and I hope there is, because all of it is kind of connected, all of those chapters are kind of connected, so you'll have to bear with me slightly today. How do we preserve that? And there's something that unfortunately this Muslim Ummah is going through, is that we are creating new ways of trying to worship Allah, and whenever a nation does that, they will always prove to be unsuccessful, and this as a consequence will be removed from them. The preservation of your actions will be lost, and the acceptance and the blessing will be lost. So if you look at all the troubles that the Muslim Ummah is going through collectively, not individually, then arguably we have caused a lot of problems for our own selves because of the topic that we have today. Imam al-Nawawi says, being balanced in acts of worship, and he quotes this ayah of the beginning of Taha. Now the Quran was not given to you as a difficulty. It wasn't meant to be burdensome. It's not something that should be difficult for you to read and understand and implement. However, as some of the ulama have said, that it's easy for some who he guides, but it's difficult for most. But how do we get that criterion? As in, how do we get that level of ability to understand, and how do we benefit from the Quran? It stems from your connection with it. If you turn away and if you don't think it's something important and you don't give it relevance in your life, then you will not be given the ability to understand his book. There was only one messenger and there's only one Quran. There weren't multiple messengers and there weren't multiple Qurans. This messenger was chosen because he was the best person to understand it, to implement it, and then convey it and preserve it. Had it been that every single one of us were able to do that, then it would have been given to all of us. We could have had multiple prophets and multiple messengers. But the point here is that it's only going to be understood by a select few. The Prophet ﷺ said, verily Allah has his own people amongst mankind. There's a group of people that Allah Jalla wa Ala will say that these are my people on Yawm al-Qiyamah. So the companions, obviously in their enthusiasm, asked, who are these people? The Prophet ﷺ said, they are the people of the Quran. They are the people of the Quran. And they are Allah's people, and they are the ones that will be closest to him on Yawm al-Qiyamah. But how can you be from the people of the Quran? Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah explains that the people of the Quran are not those people who just memorize the Quran. It's not those people who recite the Quran. It's those people who have a nice voice. The people of the Quran are those people who recite it and have an engagement with it. They understand it, they memorize it, they ponder upon it, they act upon it. They have a relationship, a very close relationship with the Quran. And once you have that, Allah will give you the ability to be balanced, to have that correct understanding, to preserve your actions. Because Allah Jalla wa Ala doesn't want difficulty for you. In Surah Baqarah, Allah tells us quite clearly that to be balanced, Allah has told us that He has legislated for us to worship Him alone, and He's given us legislation in the Sharia. But besides all of that, Allah wants ease for us. It's not that difficult. But this part has to be there from the very beginning. Otherwise you will find it difficult. It will be hard for you to wake up for Fajr. It will be hard for you to pray. Some people are quite content with praying once a week, and even that's quite difficult for some people. So then it becomes difficult because of your relationship and how intimate you are with Allah and His religion. This comes in the context, now this ayah comes in the context of Allah Jalla wa Ala legislating fasting. Allah legislating fasting, and arguably fasting is probably one of the hardest things that we do throughout the whole year. But this comes in the context of Allah giving an allowance and acceptance that we don't always have to fast. If you're going through difficulty, if you're ill, if you're traveling. So Allah Jalla wa Ala is saying that the purpose through you fasting is not that you go through difficulty and that you starve and that you make a sacrifice or that you think about the poor or all of these other misconceptions that people have of fasting. Allah Jalla wa Ala is negating difficulty, but is also affirming the reason. And this is a very important principle in Islam, which is that Allah wants for you to get close to Him, and it will be made easy for those people who want to do so. Hadith 142, and now this is the beginning of this chapter. Imam al-Nawawi brings this hadith where a woman was sitting beside the Prophet ﷺ, and he asked, "Who is she?" And the companion said, so she is someone who prays, and now she has become the talk of the town. So addressing her, the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "What is this? You are required to take upon yourselves only what you can carry out easily. By Allah, Allah does not withhold His mercy and forgiveness of you until you neglect and give up your acts of worship." The context of this hadith is that a woman, she was forcing herself to pray. She was forcing herself to pray. So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Allah doesn't want for you to burden yourself or go through difficulty in worshipping Him. He wants you to be constant. He wants you to be consistent, even if it's slight. Obviously the obligations have to be there, but anything that you want to add on top of that, the main thing is consistency. It's no good that you pray tahajjud for 1 month throughout the whole year, and then for the 11 months you don't even stand up and pray 2 rak'at. It'd be better for you to be consistent throughout that year, even if it is something which is very slight." There's another hadith, 143, that 3 men came out their houses, and one man said, "Well, I'm not gonna eat." Another man said, "Well, I'm not gonna go to bed. I'm not gonna get married." Another person said, and they basically said that they are going to force themselves in worship and sacrifice what they thought were their desires. So the Prophet ﷺ said that this is not from my Sunnah. My Sunnah is not that you go through hardships and you leave off what you want as a human being. What it means is that you engage with your desires in a way that Allah is going to be pleased with you by. So again, I think this is kind of carrying on from what we talked about last week, and I actually wanted to do this last week and not carrying on here. But if you remember, we were talking about how worship, there's a misconception that people have of worship where they feel that worship has to be a person where he's constantly reciting the Quran and he's constantly in salah and he's fasting, etc. That's not the definition of worship. The ulama have said that any action which you do out of sincerity to please Allah is worship. So even if you are just smiling and sitting with your brother just for the sake of Allah, even if you want to say something that is good, even if you want to give advice, even if you want to feed someone, even if you want to, all of that is worship. You got a question, Abil?
Yeah, Sheikh, you said that Prophet ﷺ asked why she was burdening herself by praying.
Yeah.
So what was she meant to do? Because if she didn't want to pray,
she was forcing herself to pray and exerting her body through measures that she wasn't able to handle. So the Prophet, sorry?
Was she disabled?
No. As in she was using ropes and sticks to stand up. So the Prophet ﷺ said that that's not legislated. Why are you doing that? Why are you putting yourself through that? Even though the Prophet ﷺ used to stand to the extent that his feet would swell up. But that's not the objective, like we said last week. We looked at that hadith also. Hadith 144, ruined are those people who insist on hardship in matters of faith. These people are ruined, Prophet ﷺ said. So here again, you have to remember the topic is talking about being balanced. This doesn't mean that we become completely liberal and negligent and think, okay, well, the Prophet ﷺ is telling us not to be extreme, and I think praying 5 times is extreme, or doing certain things is extreme, and people actually do feel like that. They think that if you just pray once a week, that would be fine. As long as you fast in Ramadan and pray the Eid Salah, you are still a Muslim, and all of those things. That's not what is intended here. What is intended is that you pace yourself. Yes, you get closer to Allah, but in a measurement that suits you. But that requires you to be organized. because Islam is easy. And the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever makes the religion something which is going to be too rigorous for him, it will overcome him. It's not possible for anyone on the face of this earth to follow every single sunnah that the Prophet ﷺ gave. Do you think that's possible? Every single sunnah that the Prophet ﷺ did, do you think it's possible for one individual to mimic all of that? It's not possible. That's what makes him the Rasul. He did everything which was perfect. There's nobody that can mimic that in the most precise way, even if he's doing all the actions. Or so the Prophet ﷺ is telling us here, you will not be able to, if you're going to exert too much pressure on yourself, it will overcome you. And that's not what is required. What is required is that you take the middle way, the balanced way when it comes to worship. Now the balanced way, like we said here, that you don't become completely negligent, you preserve your obligatory actions, but the middle way is that you seek to get closer to Allah in a manner that is suitable for yourself. And the more you do that, and the more balanced you are, the more you will fall onto this side of the spectrum. So people have this idea that that's it, from now on I'm going to pray every single day, and I'm going to fast every single day, I'm going to do certain things and exert hardship. But that doesn't make sense, because the Prophet ﷺ says start with the obligatory and then make yourself better with these optional actions, and then what you initially wanted to do will become easy for you because of that programming that you've gone through. Ibn Rajab in Fath al-Bari says, the one who does not let his mount rest will not reach his destination. If you've got an animal, if you've got a car, and you're not servicing that car, your car will break down. And what will happen is when you break down, you'll be left stranded. Will become like the one who is cut off, because his mount is no longer able to continue. So now what has happened, he's stranded. And he's closer actually towards doom. He's actually closer towards what he didn't want to be. And he's nowhere near the objective anymore. So say you're traveling from here to London and you just put your foot down, you redline it, your car, your engine's going to explode. The gasket will definitely go. And you probably will only get on your journey for about 5-10 miles probably, and that's it. So you're nowhere near your destination, and you've not gone anywhere from where you're trying to leave. Had he been kind to his mount, and he serviced it, and he nurtured it, and he programmed himself, and he planned, and he was organized, he will get to his destination in the most easiest of ways. Hadith 146, the Prophet ﷺ came into the mosque and he noticed a rope stretched out between two poles. This is similar to what we've seen before. A rope is stretched out between two poles. He said, what is this rope for? And he said, this is the rope for Zainab, radiallahu anha. When she wants to observe voluntary prayers, when she feels tired, what does she do? Instead of going to sleep, she ties herself up and then she makes herself stand. So the Prophet ﷺ said, don't do that. Untie it. Don't do it. What are you doing? You shouldn't perform prayers in this manner. Do it so that you are active and that you know what you are doing. And it could be, in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that you exert yourself so much, especially when you're tired, you exert yourself so much, you don't even know what you're saying anymore. You don't even know what you're doing anymore. And that level of quality has been lost. So you're trying to do something which is good, but the level of quality is not there because your body can't handle it. That is, for example, a late night prayer, for example. But that happens on a daily basis, whether it's, a late night prayer or not. Ibn Munir, one of the scholars, and this is again from Fath al-Bari, but this is of Ibn Hajar, he said that this hadith is one of the signs of prophethood. We have seen that people before us who went into religious extremism were ending up in doom. They were cut off from what they were trying to achieve, but because they weren't balanced, they ended up falling. It doesn't mean that you don't try to become perfect. It doesn't mean that you leave your obligatory actions. But what it means is that you are not allowed to go into something that you can't handle. Because that will end up making a person bored. And it might even just be better for him to preserve his obligatory actions in a balanced way, with khushu', with concentration, with quality, rather than doing too much with no quality. Hadith 147, the Prophet ﷺ, this is a hadith that if somebody is drowsy, he should lie down. Don't force yourself. And even if you are tired, there are certain things you can still do. You don't have to do 120 miles all the time. Hadith 148 of Jabir ibn Samura, who reported that he used to perform the prayer with the Prophet ﷺ, and his salat was moderate and his khutbah was moderate. This clearly shows now here, even the Jumu'ah, his khutbah wasn't long. He didn't want to make it boring for people. And some of the ulama have said that the khutbah shouldn't be long because the whole point is that people are coming, and it should be easy enough for a person to memorize or remember certain things that the Imam has said, which will help him then carry on and motivate him for the rest of the week. And the Prophet ﷺ was the most perfect in doing that, and in the salat as well. But at the same time, Jabir said that it was balanced. It wasn't lengthy. It wasn't lengthy. So now, how long does it take for you to pray 2 rak'at with Sabbih Isma and Ghashiyah? About 5 minutes, 6 minutes, yeah? And the Prophet ﷺ said in another hadith that the khutbah, for somebody who has fiqh and who has good understanding, the khutbah would be shorter than the salat. So how long would it all take? You look at about 10-12 minutes. This is what he is saying. Imagine now you put yourself in that position. Allah blesses you to go to see the Prophet ﷺ and it's Friday, and you go into the masjid and the khutbah lasts about 10 minutes. And that's Rasulullah. How would you feel? You would see, and this is the exact message that's been put here, is that balance, moderation. This is a religion of moderation. There's another long hadith here which is again talking about moderation, and it's an incident that happened between Abu Darda and Salman. And Abu Darda was somebody who was a devout worshipper, and his wife used to actually complain. He says that he doesn't really sleep much, he doesn't eat much, and I don't really see much of him. And Salman said, well, what you're doing is wrong. That is not right. You need to be balanced. So he went and stayed over, and then he observed this for himself. And then he went to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, look, this man, all he does is he prays and he fasts. And his family don't even know him. So the Prophet ﷺ said, what did he say? Who was right? Did he side with Abu Darda? No, he didn't side with Abu Darda. Even though many people think that this is the idea of piety, when it's actually not. Another long hadith here we have of Abdullah ibn Amr ibn As, who said that the Prophet ﷺ the Prophet ﷺ was informed that I said that I would perform prayers the whole night and observe fasting every single day, so as long as I live. So the Prophet ﷺ was surprised by this, and he told him that you won't be able to do that. He said what you should do is fast some days and break some days. So he said, no, but I can do more. I can do more. Permit me to fast every single day of my life. The Prophet ﷺ said that the best fast of Dawood, just fast one day and another day. That's the fast of a prophet. What more do you want? He goes, no, I can do more. The Prophet ﷺ said to him, you know what? If you want to fast every single day, it's as if you fasted 3 days every single month, you would have fasted for the whole year. How does that work out? If you fast 3 days every single month, then it's as if you fasted for the whole year. 3 times 10 is 30, and that's what you need to do. Not saying that you don't fast, alternatively, especially in winter when Maghrib is so early and Fajr is so late. But the point again here is being that we're trying to get across is this word here, moderation. As you can see, the translators putting certain words in here so that we can get the understanding, moderation and balance. And again here we have another long hadith of Hanzala. And Hanzala, he said that when I used to go with the Prophet ﷺ, my iman used to be so high. My iman used to be very, very strong. When I go home, it's something different. I'm laughing, I'm playing with my family. So he thought to himself one day, you know what? I'm a munafiq. I'm a munafiq. How can I do that? 1 second my iman is high, and when I go home I forget Allah and His Messenger and I'm enjoying my life. So he went around the streets of Medina saying, Handal has become a munafiq, Handal has become a munafiq. He met Abu Bakr, and Abu Bakr said, what are you doing? So then Abu Bakr was not happy with that. So he goes, let's go to Rasulullah. So they went to Rasulullah, and the Prophet ﷺ said that had your iman and your piety remained at that state, then the angels will come down and they'll shake hands with you out of respect and out of honor, that you'll be better than the angels. But he said, for your family you have a time, and for this you have a time. Be balanced, Hanzala. And that's not a sign of nifaq. That's not a sign of you not being devout. But again, like we've said, it's the concept of worship that the Prophet ﷺ is getting across. You invest time with your children, you invest time with your family, you're doing your university work. All of that can transform itself to being an act of worship. Now, if it becomes an act of worship through your ikhlas, will Allah bless you in it? Will Allah give you tawfiq in it? Will Allah make a lot of khair come out of it? Of course it will. Hadith 152, and I believe this is the last one, is of Ibn Abbas, reported by the Prophet ﷺ was delivering a khutbah. He noticed a man who was standing. So he asked about him. And he was told that his name was Abu Israel. And he had taken a vow, check this out, he took a vow that he is going to fast and he's going to stand in the heat. There's another narration which says that he's going to stand underneath the sun, there it is, or go into shade, and he's going to remain standing whilst fasting in that state. Fasting from Fajr until Maghrib, standing, not sitting down, and staying in the sun. That's what he wanted to do. And he thought that was an act of worship. Now you might laugh at that, but there's people who are doing pretty much similar, well, even worse than that in the Ummah today. People are going to graves, people are innovating new celebrations, people are changing the Aqeedah, people are changing what Iman is, people are changing what Islam is, people are innovating and changing the religion, the Sharia as a whole, and what that will create is something like this, difficulty. And he doesn't need to do that. So the Prophet ﷺ told him, carry on talking, this is not what Allah wants from you. Go into the shade because that's not what Allah wants from you. But complete your fast because this is what Allah wants from you. What's the objective of fasting now? Is it to starve? Is it to sacrifice? Is it to put yourself through physical and mental torture? No, it's not. The point here is that Islam is a balanced religion and it wants you to program yourself gradually. It wants you to become better, but you need to take that step through ikhlas and fulfill what are those obligations upon you. Sort yourself out, sort your life out gradually and not fall into extremes. What we learn from this also that it is not prescribed and it's not even required for a person to do acts which will cause hardship in his life. It's not what Allah wants from us. And Islam have set down conditions, and the Sharia has set down conditions that even if you were to do certain actions which you thought were pious, if some of those actions that you're going through and you're putting through yourself through those hardships, guess what? It won't even be accepted from you. This man vowed that he's not going to sit down and he's not going to speak and he's not going to take any shade. Was he going to be rewarded for those actions? Not a single one of them. And this is what Imam Shatibi is saying in Al-Iqtisam. He's saying that those conditions that those people put and making things difficult for you, all of those conditions were nullified by the Prophet ﷺ. Therefore, there is no reward for those actions. There's a long summary here, and for the sake of keeping it short, I don't want to go through all of it. It will be on the blog, so you can access it. But Imam as-Sa'di said that this is a very important qaida and a very important principle in the religion, which is that religion is easy. The Sharia is easy. Islam is easy. If a person has the pillars of Iman internally and he works on the external, this is what is required from him. And the more he does that, the more he will find perfection in his morals and in his deeds. He will become a better person. It will affect his personality. It will affect his behavior. It will affect the way he walks and the way he talks. He will then see himself as being somebody who is accountable, but this can only come gradually. And this is exactly what is required from us. Not that you exert yourself in excessive acts of worship. We're talking about accountability. We're talking about you programming yourself so that you can get that. But that can only come through a series of moderation and programming. It's just like rehab. If you get somebody who's an alcoholic, he's on the worst side of the spectrum, what are you going to do? Tell him to stop drinking alcohol straight away? I don't think they do that. I think they go through a process. The Shaykh also said that, like I said, it's quite lengthy here, but what he's saying, this is quite good here. He's summarizing some of the benefits that we can gain from all of these hadith, which is that, like I said, Islam is easy. And when you are going through hardships, even through things that are legislated in Islam, it will always open the door for easiness. It will always open the door for relief. So you might think, okay, well, I'm at a stage in my life where I do want to become better, but I can't pray 5 times a day. Let me just choose 1 or 2. That's not what is being understood here. You still need to preserve those obligations, but the more you exert yourself, you will find relief. You will find assistance in being able to do the right thing. The Prophet ﷺ also told us to follow his sunnah to the best of your ability, and all of this is from the understanding of the Sharia. And like I said, we can refer to this afterwards. Being balanced. If you are balanced, this will enable you to preserve your good deeds. Like we've said before, being balanced doesn't necessarily mean that you exert yourself with things that you can't handle. And what that will do then, if you go into extreme, is that your good deeds will be lost. And your preservation of those good deeds will be lost. But if you are balanced, what happens? You bank those good deeds as you go along. And you build on that. And your investment will grow. Allah is telling us in Surah Hadid that now is the time for you to come and contemplate. Alam ya'ni alladhina amanu. Is the time not come for those people who say that they believe, that their hearts finally at some stage in their life accept the dhikr of Allah? Has the time not come yet? When is going to be the right time? Because there have been people that came before you, they kept procrastinating and procrastinating and procrastinating. And what happened? A long period of time came, and Allah Jalla wa Ala said that their hearts became rock solid. فَقَسَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ. What happens when your heart becomes hard and dhikr can't penetrate it and guidance can't infiltrate it and nothing can soften your personality anymore, and it just becomes about desires, it just becomes about you and yourself, and you not thinking about the akhirah, you're not thinking about your connection with Allah or the creation around you. What happens? Your heart becomes hard. What happens? Allah Jalla wa Ala says, most of them on the face of this earth who have that trait will become open sinners. Corruption, injustice, desires, shallowness, all of that will spread throughout mankind. So when is the right time then? When is the right time? Allah also says in another ayah, in Hadith also, that there were a group of people from the people of the book, is that they wanted to do goodness, but they didn't know how. So what they did is they invented new ways of worshipping Allah. Ibtida'uha. And Allah didn't legislate any of them. And what they wanted to do is to gain Allah's pleasure out of trying to invent new acts of worship. But none of that was fulfilled for them. How is that related? Because here we're talking about being balanced in order for you to preserve. And then the Shaykh brings these ayat and he's talking about, again, being steadfast and not letting the objective be lost. Allah says, continue worshipping. And he's telling the Prophet ﷺ, continue worshipping Allah until yaqeen comes to you. And also in this ayah here is a parable that Allah Jalla wa Ala gives to the Quraysh. That people, it doesn't make sense that you try and reinforce and build and build and build. And when you finally achieve what you wanted to build, now for example, you're doing a 3-year course at university or 1-year course at university. Does it make sense that you drop out a week before you're going to graduate? This is what Allah Jalla wa Ala is saying here. It doesn't make sense that you are trying and you're preparing and you're trying to preserve and then you let it all go and let it slip away from you. All of those things that you have and you've worked towards can be lost at any stage. But what that requires from you is to be steadfast and seek to preserve it. This chapter is quite short because there's only 3 hadiths. Hadith number 153, the Prophet ﷺ said that if a person was to recite during his night prayer, he would be rewarded for that. And he will be written as those people who are pious. And he will be written for those people who have forsaken their beds for the sake of Allah Jalla wa Ala. But however, if you fell asleep and you didn't pray the night prayer, Allah has given you a chance to get that reward during the day. Did anybody know that? That if you didn't pray the tahajjud prayer, and you had the intention of praying the tahajjud prayer, but you didn't pray the tahajjud prayer for whatever reason, and sleep overcame you, that you've actually got a chance to preserve that tahajjud during the day. When does that happen? When do you do that? Is there qada for it or not? Between Fajr and Dhuhr. During the duha time, as in after the sunrise until Dhuhr, that is the time when you can preserve your tahajjud even if you slept. And Allah will write it for you as if you stood there at night. Hadith 154, Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told Abdullah ibn Amr, don't be like so and so. Look at this, yeah? Because every single one of us could be very guilty of this. Abdullah, don't be like so and so. Who is Abdullah? We saw him just a minute ago. What was he asking before? He wanted to fast every single day of his life. And the Prophet said, don't do that. Just relax. One day on, one day off. He goes, no, I want more. He goes, don't you know you just do 3 days? That would be good for you. He's asking again, and the Prophet is instructing him again, that Abdullah, don't be like the person who used to stand up during the night, but then he abandons it afterwards. Has anybody qualified for this in this room? What do you think? Is anybody negligent of this? Every single one of us, you stood at least for one part of Ramadan, whether it's the last 10 nights or the whole of Ramadan. The Prophet ﷺ is telling us, don't be like those people who have stood during the night and then they end up abandoning it. That is not preservation. You could have your Taraweeh, you could have all of your deeds being taken away from you because you didn't preserve it. When the Messenger of Allah missed the optional night prayer, he used to make it up during the daytime. This is about preserving, because you need to be balanced in order for you to preserve, and you need to be preserving those actions in order for you to be balanced. As we see in this hadith, you won't be able to preserve if you're not balanced. And you need to be balanced, and if you can't be negligent, then you won't preserve anything. Here's a question. How or what advice would you give to a person to try and follow the correct manhaj? And I'm guessing that everybody knows what the term manhaj means. Is there anybody that doesn't know what the term manhaj means? Okay, if you think a person is following the wrong kind of Islam, if you think that somebody's following the wrong kind of Islam, maybe he's not taking from the correct sources, maybe he's taking from people who are not qualified, etc. What advice, or how would you advise that person to think again about the kind of Islam that he is following? What advice would you give to that person? It's a quiet room today, isn't it? Everyone's tired. The Prophet ﷺ and the text tell us to follow the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. This is the only way that you can be balanced. This is the only way that you can preserve your deeds. What is the Sunnah? We've heard it. We hear it all the time. Follow the Sunnah. This is the Sunnah. That person is doing the Sunnah. But what is Sunnah? Does anybody know what Sunnah is? Yes, right?
The practical implementation of the Prophet Muhammad, whether the statements or approving something or actions he did.
Excellent. It's whatever he did, whatever he said, or what he approved of. But there's something a bit more deeper than that, like Ibn Uthaymeen says here. He says that the Sunnah refers to the way he was. Just the way he was. Just his personality, just his behavior, just his approach towards people, his approach towards manners, his approach towards worship, the way he used to talk to people, the way he used to deal with people. And then the way we understand that is how he used to talk to people. What kind of actions did he have? What kind of actions did he approve when he saw other people doing something and he said, yeah, that's good. But we need to take a step back before all of that in defining Sunnah. As Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah is saying here, is this. It's your connection. It's your level of being balanced. It's your level of being preserving your good deeds. Because anybody can say that I'm following the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, but their manners are not there, or their dealings are not there, or they have a misinterpretation of what he has said or did, and then that affects these other aspects of it. Imam al-Nawawi brings many ayat here, and all of these ayat here now, I would suggest are very important for us to understand, and you can go back to the book and try and memorize them in Arabic, at least if not in English, because these are quite important for us as a ummah as a whole. Because you got people, like we said, innovating practices, people doing shirk, people are calling towards extreme thought, people are calling to ultra liberal thought and saying that you don't need to do anything, just have la ilaha illallah in your iman. But all of this shows the actual implementation of the correct way of thinking about the religion. In this first ayah, Allah is telling us, whatever the Prophet ﷺ gives you, then take it. Whatever he tells you not to do, then stay away from it. This is practicality. This is the Sunnah. How do we know that this is good for us? How do we know that this is not something which is presumed? Or how do we know that it was only good for that time and not good for our time right now? Because the Prophet ﷺ doesn't speak from his desires. Everything was revelation, and that revelation is universal for time and place. Allah Jalla wa Ala is telling us, if you want to have your deeds accepted, if you want Allah to forgive you, if you want Allah to love you, if you want Allah to protect you, if you want Allah to protect the things that you love, then you need to love Allah Jalla wa Ala. One of the Mufassirun, Imam as-Sa'di, said that if you want Allah to preserve you yourself, but then also not just you yourself, the things that you love, the things that are dire to you, your family members and all those other things, your possessions maybe even, then you need to love Allah. Because by loving Allah, He will preserve you and the things that you love. That's His generosity. That's the amount of mercy that He can have. But how do you do that? How can you say you love Allah? Is it sufficient for you just to say, I love Allah? It's not enough for a person to say, I love Allah and I believe in Him and I worship Him. It's not sufficient. What we should be asking is, does Allah love me? Is Allah accepting it from me? Am I doing something which is pleasing Him? Because everybody says that, even people who are not Muslims say that they love Allah. And this ayah has been known by many of the Salaf as the ayah of testing, ayah of imtihan. This is the criterion now. If you say you love Allah, it's not sufficient. You need to prove and find out whether Allah loves you back. Now the only way you know that if Allah loves you back is how? Fattabi'uni. Follow me, follow my sunnah. Allah is commanding the people that the Prophet ﷺ was sent to, Muslims and non-Muslims, throughout the whole of mankind, from his time onwards, 1440 years of worth of man and jinn. Allah is telling the Prophet ﷺ to say to all of them, follow me, then Allah will love you and He will accept it from you and He'll forgive your sins. And what we learn from this now is that if Allah has given you the tawfiq to understand His sunnah and to implement His sunnah, then that is acceptance from Allah. That is acceptance from Allah, and He has forgiven you and He does love you and He's continuing to support you. The Prophet ﷺ, we have the best example for those people who are sincere to Allah. And this ayah here in Surah An-Nisa, ayah number 65, comes within the context of some of the munafiqun. Now the munafiqun, you have to remember, and I will say that again, this is a very big problem for the ummah today. The munafiqun, did they pray with the Prophet ﷺ? Did they make Ramadan with the Prophet ﷺ? Some of them, they even performed Umrah with the Prophet ﷺ. They used to go on battles. They used to do every single thing to support the Prophet ﷺ. But what were they? They were hypocrites. What's a hypocrite? Where a person says that he believes in Allah and His Messenger, but internally he actually doesn't really believe. He actually wanted to become unsuccessful at some stage, but he's just going along with the motions, just being with the party. This ayah was revealed in context of some of the munafiqun. There was actually an incident between a munafiq and a Jew in Medina. And who was in the wrong? The munafiq. He was in the wrong. And the Jew said, let's go to Rasulullah and he will decide between us. You know why? Because he will do it correctly. So the munafiq said, no, let's not go to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Let's go to somebody else. Let me pick a person. Let's go to your side. Allah Jalla wa Ala says, they will not believe. You will not believe until you make Muhammad alayhi salam the criterion for all of your affairs. Stop. No, that's not enough. You accept his sunnah, and then you don't find any hardship of his sunnah inside of yourself. You accept it, wholeheartedly accept it, and then you make submission to it. This I know is good for me. Whether I understand it or not, whether I see the hikmah right now or not, maybe it will explain to me later, maybe I'll see it for myself later. But this is the sign of Iman. And like we've said, it's not easy. It's quite difficult for a lot of people because this ayah of imtihan, this ayah of testing, is quite difficult for some people. They'll say that I believe in Allah, I love Allah, and I can do certain actions, but I don't need to do everything. This is why many of the companions feared for themselves nifaq. They feared for themselves hypocrisy. Am I actually saying that I support the Prophet ﷺ? And some of them were guaranteed paradise. They were guaranteed paradise, but they still feared that they weren't doing this correctly because it is difficult. But you need to understand the sunnah, you need to implement the sunnah and accept it wholeheartedly. What happens if you don't accept it? Allah Jalla wa Ala is saying here in this ayah here at the end of Surah An-Nur, chapter 24, those people who reject and turn away from this, again, this is within the context of the munafiqun. And Surah An-Nur actually is talking about incidents that happened with the Prophet ﷺ and the munafiqun. Do you know that the munafiqun, they actually tried to make the Prophet ﷺ split with his wife Aisha. They made lies about Aisha, and the Prophet ﷺ stopped talking to her for a long period of time. And another hadith, we know that he was asked, who's the most beloved person to you? What did he say? Aisha. This is how much he loved her. And this is how much menace that they tried to infiltrate in Medina and in the life of the Prophet ﷺ. Surah An-Nur goes on, it begins by talking about that, but then it goes on to talk about some of the etiquettes and the characteristics of those people who have nifaq. And one of those biggest ones is that they continually just keep talking about perversion and trying to remove women from their rights, and they try and make it a fitna for men. It's one of the biggest things that they did. In conclusion, فَلْيَحْذَرِ الَّذِينَ يُخَالِفُونَ عَنْ أَمْرِهِ, warn those people who want to do that to your sunnah, to do that to your personality, to do that to you and your religion, that if they continue, that there is a huge calamity waiting for them. A fitna, or a punishment in the akhirah. Imam Ahmad was asked, what is that calamity? He said that calamity is shirk. The more you go against the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, slowly you are regressing. You're not balanced. You're not preserving. To the extent that you could end up leaving Islam altogether, even if you have the outward appearance of it. Now, why is that really bad for us now as a ummah today? Why is that so important? It's because there are so many actions that are happening in the ummah today that people are doing under the name of Islam. People are doing it under the name of piety, under the name of the Sharia, and they're saying that this is part of Islam. But that is clear nifaq. This is how the Sahabas would have seen it. That this person is clearly going against the Sunnah and he's trying to attribute it to the Prophet ﷺ. Some people don't even do that. Some people, they say they have weaknesses. For example, they smoke cigarettes and maybe they listen to music, but he appears as a pious man. And you look at him, like we've said before, that he appears to be pious. Again, that falls under this. That falls under this. That some of the companions saw that a person is happy and he's happy with going against the Sunnah. He's happy with sinning. He's happy with, being immoral. He's happy with that. But at the same time, he's saying that, yeah, I have Iman and I'm praying Salah and I'm doing these good deeds. And he's not trying to rectify. We're not talking about weakness here. We're talking about a person being happy in that state. And the Prophet ﷺ is telling us, Allah Jalla wa Ala is telling us that if you leave the Prophet ﷺ Sunnah, then you could regress to a state where you're actually left with absolutely nothing. Allah protect us. In this ayah, Allah Jalla wa Ala is reinforcing and reassuring the Prophet ﷺ, don't worry. Don't worry. he's been through what he's been through in Makkah, he's been through what he's been through in Medina with the Munafiqun. But in this very short line here, just a few words, Allah Jalla wa Ala is saying here, you are on the right path. Don't worry. Doesn't matter if people accept you or not. Doesn't matter if people are trying to make you split up with your wife or not, or if they're trying to tarnish your reputation, if they're trying to mock you and make cartoons about you and all of those things. It doesn't really matter, because you are on the right path. That means that we as followers have to be on that same path, and we need to have that level of balance and preservation. Look at this ayah here. This ayah was revealed to the wives of the Prophet ﷺ. Allah Jalla wa Ala is addressing the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, and he's saying to them, remember and think about the favor of Allah that you have a Rasul in your house. Number one, whose house is it? Is it his house or is it their house? Allah is saying, buyutikun, in your house. Women's rights, women's possessions. And not only that do you have a Rasul, but the ayat of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is in your house. You are guardians for the Quran and you are guardians for His Sunnah, because there's nobody who knows His Sunnah more than you. Allah is telling us here. And Allah is saying that He knows all of the affairs. He is Latif al-Khabir. What we learn from this is that Allah Jalla wa Ala has entrusted women with a huge task in preserving the Quran and the Sunnah. But not only that, had the Prophet ﷺ been somebody who was enforcing himself upon women, or was somebody who didn't believe in women, having an existence in the ummah or having any kind of rights, etc., why would it attribute possessions to them, physical possessions? And within the context of this ayah, Allah gives them also a choice. If you want the dunya, then tell them, if you want the dunya, then you can have the dunya, and He will leave you alone. But if you want the akhirah, and if you want the ayat, and if you want that hikmah to remain in your house, then be patient. And that's within this context here. So as we can see, it's not just about following the Sunnah. As you can see, it's highly relevant to the Muslim Ummah today. It's very relevant into what people are trying to level at Islam, and it's obviously incorrect. Hadith 156, the Prophet ﷺ is telling us to accept the Sunnah wholeheartedly. And he said that the people that came before us were led astray because of their many questioning. And when they used to question too much about religion, that means they had an idea of doubt, they had an element of doubt, they had an element of not accepting the Sunnah that their Prophet came with. And what happens is you end up leaving it and you start following your own Sunnah. Prophet ﷺ in another hadith gave advice to the companions, and they were shedding their tears because of the level of admiration that was there. And they feared that this was the last time that they're going to see this man again. So now they said, tell us, give us parting advice, Rasulullah. So Rasulullah said, fear Allah and listen and obey to those in authority over you, because you're going to live in a time there's going to be a lot of discord. There's going to be a lot of fitna, there's going to be a lot of social media, there's going to be a lot of music, there's going to be a lot of dunya that's calling you to leave the path that Allah Jalla wa Ala said that if you follow that path, then you will be upon the Sirat al-Mustaqim, which is the path of His Sunnah. What is the way out of that discord? Hold fast to my Sunnah. Hold fast to my Sunnah. My Sunnah is the only way that you can save yourself and your families from going into the hellfire. Hadith 158, follow the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, preserves you and it puts you on that path of Jannah. The Prophet ﷺ said that everybody will go to Jannah illa man aba, except for those people who refuse. The companions thought, wait a minute, people are going to refuse going into Jannah. How does that make sense? We're with you day and night because we want the Jannah. And there's some people that are going to come and optionally refuse the Jannah. Arrogantly, just straight up say, we don't want the Jannah. Prophet ﷺ said, whoever obeys me in my Sunnah, then they will get the Jannah. And whoever disobeys me, then those are those people who refuse. Hadith 159, arrogance in against accepting the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. This is one of the lessons that we learn from these two hadith here. Hadith 159, Salama ibn Aqwa reported that my father said that a person ate in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ. What a hand did he eat with? He ate with his left hand. So the Prophet ﷺ said, look how trivial this might be, yeah? The Prophet ﷺ said, eat with your right hand. He continued with the left hand. And he said, what he said in the end, you will never be able to do it. What does that mean? Is it about the hand? It's not about the hand. And to the extent that ulama have said that if you have to eat with your left hand, you can eat with your left hand. That's not the issue. The issue here is pride, is arrogance, is rejecting of the sunnah. A sunnah comes to you, no, but my sheikh didn't say that, my mullah did. I don't agree with that personally. It doesn't conform with my lifestyle and all those kind of things. Accepting the sunnah should be something that you have, and it should be part of your iman. The Prophet ﷺ, look at this hadith here. He said, make your row straight in salah, otherwise you'll be disunited. What's the point? What do we learn from this? If you follow the sunnah, you will be united. You'll perform your acts of worship correctly. You will be with those who gave you that precedence from before, and you'll be continuing that message of correct Islam until now. But if you don't, then you will be disunited. You will create new ways of doing acts of worship, and it will just fasad. Your quality won't be there. The sunnah saves life. It saves property. How do we know that? The Prophet ﷺ said, what happened once in Medina, a house got caught fire. Now, if you remember at that time, or if you know at that time, they didn't obviously have electricity. They used to have lanterns. They used to use oil and fat as well. They used to burn that, and that used to be their lamp. So the Prophet ﷺ said, at night time, after Maghrib, after Isha, put your lamps out. Don't go to sleep with your lamps with fire ignited in your house. Don't do that, because that fire can spread. And the Prophet ﷺ also said that there are shayateen that may want to do that to you, and that is also possible. A shaitan and jinn can enter your house and disrupt things, spill things over, and it is also possible that there are animals that can knock that over. And it actually happened in the house of the Prophet ﷺ once, where some of his possessions were burnt because of a mouse that entered. The Prophet ﷺ said, and this is what we learn from this, is that if you accept his sunnah, whether you understand it or not, fire is your enemy, so put it out before you go to bed. It's quite simple. But look what you learn from that. You're saving life, you're saving property, and this is what he came with. Prophet ﷺ also taught us how to build iman, but he also taught us how to preserve and build an economy. And that is also from his sunnah. And again, this is a very long hadith where the Prophet ﷺ is talking about how to irrigate land, etc. And what we learn from a separate incident is that when he went into the battle of Khaybar, he had a choice of killing everyone. And these people proved treacherous over and over again. Now this is in the 7th year after his main hijrah, after Badr, after Uhud, after Ahzab, after all of these huge monumental battles that have happened in the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. He's actually now got the people that helped create all that fitna from before. What would you do with a person like that? Again and again and again, these people have been instigating attacks on Medina, whether it's been actual, whether it's been media slurs, whether it's been propagation, all of those things. They've been trying to do all of that. Finally, he gets into their city and he takes them over. What does he do? Does he kill them? He had every chance to kill them all. Does he put them in exile? He didn't do that. What did he do? He preserved them. He said, you lot, I'm going to let you live. You lot carry on doing what you're doing. Because Khaybar was actually a very well irrigated place also. So he said, instead of killing everyone, what we can do is we can make the economy grow. And that's exactly what they did. Alayhi salam. The Sunnah, we also know, he was also a doctor. He was a general. He was a politician. Drama. What do you mean, actual drama?
No, as in like actual.
The Sunnah is medicine. Maybe we should start shouting as well. The Sunnah is medicine. The Messenger of Allah ﷺ, look at this hadith here. He used to lick his fingers after eating. And he said, you don't know where the barakah lies. You don't know where the part of nutrition actually is. And the reason why I put down medicine is because I believe that there's been some kind of research saying that if you eat with your hands, it's actually better for you. and there's actually a substance that gets released whilst you're eating with your hands, and that helps your digestion. Allah knows best, but we don't need any of that, do we? Because all of this clearly shows He did that, there must be khair in it for us. But again, this doesn't necessarily mean, as we'll see later on, this doesn't necessarily mean that we, get back onto a camel because that's what He did, and you go back to a primitive or old-fashioned way of living. Islam is not cultural. Islam is not bound by a particular language or a particular type of food or a particular, cultural way of life. That's not what Islam is. So if the Prophet ﷺ is telling us to do certain things, that would fit in a cultural way of you doing it. And it's possible. The Sunnah creates unity and it promotes security. And the Prophet ﷺ is saying here on the Day of Judgment, people will be assembled and they will be naked and they will be barefooted and uncircumcised. And he recited the ayah where Allah Jalla wa Ala says that we will make mankind return to their original state and they will all be presented in front of Allah in that original state. And the first person, Prophet ﷺ is saying here, the first person to be clothed on the Day of Judgment will be Ibrahim. Then some of my companions will be taken to the left towards hellfire. And then I will say, they're for my ummah. These are my companions. And then it will be said to them, leave them alone. You didn't know what they did after you. This is the point, and the hadith goes on, but this is exactly the point, that you can, or a group of people from this ummah will come saying that they follow the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, being proud in being the messenger, and saying that they followed Islam, but none of that will be accepted. And then the time that you need it the most, you will find it being rejected. Why? Because they innovated, they rejected, they fell into sins, they fell into innovations, they fell into new ideas of thinking and belief. The Sunnah also makes people responsible. The Messenger of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam here in this hadith, this is a way which is known as qadh. And al-qadh was a way of catching an animal with the time of Quraysh, and it's quite barbaric. What they used to do is they used to get pebbles and they used to flick those pebbles with their thumb at animals, and what they used to do is they end up killing that animal, and they used to do it in a barbaric way. And some of them they used to have like a sling, and they used to try and hit that animal until it dies. And when it dies, that's when they go. The Prophet ﷺ said, that's not allowed. Don't gorge, and don't do that with the enemy. Don't do anything that should break the tooth. Don't gorge out eyes. Don't do things like that. That was culturally acceptable at that time, but it's not responsible. It's not accountability. It's not humane. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ came with, like we said before. The Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ liberates people and it gives people intellect and it guides them to the correct path. One of the Tabi'een said that I saw Umar al-Khattab kissing the black stone, and he said, by Allah, I know that you're a stone. You can't benefit me and you can't harm me in the slightest, but I'm only kissing you not because I believe that you have special powers, not because I believe that you can bless me in some kind of a way. I don't believe in any of these things. You, even though you're from Jannah, you're just a stone to me. You don't mean anything. But I'm only doing it because I saw the Messenger of Allah kissing you. Now look at this. He was so liberated in his iman and in his intellect and his following the Prophet ﷺ and his guidance to the right path. He said something which I don't think anybody would be proud or even dare to say today, that I'm not going to kiss the Kaaba, I'm not going to kiss the black stone, I'm not even going to touch it. I wouldn't have touched it if I didn't see the Prophet ﷺ doing so. It gives you intellect. Some people though are quite enthusiastic about calling towards the Sunnah, and if they see something wrong, they say what you're doing is bid'ah, or what you're doing is misguidance, or what you're doing is not the right way. Here what we have done is we have collected a few conditions necessary for you to try and rectify people if you see them being misguided. Number one, the very first and the most important thing for every single action is that you must be sincere for Allah. What is sincerity? What is ikhlas? Seeking Allah, what does that mean? Seeking Allah, making Allah happy and seeking His Jannah. Ikhlas has two aspects to it. Making Allah, or pleasing Allah, I should say, and seeking His Jannah. If I was to say, look, I'm going to pray my salah so that Allah will be happy with me, but I'm not bothered about the Jannah. Are you a mukhlis? Do you have ikhlas? You don't have ikhlas. If you say, if Allah is happy with me or not, that's fine, but I just want to be safe from the fire. Is that ikhlas? That is not ikhlas. You need to have both of these things to have ikhlas. So if a person wants to rectify someone, if he sees somebody who thinks that's misguided, etc., or he's doing something which is wrong, he needs to have ikhlas. He needs to do it for the sake of Allah and so that he can enter Jannah. Number two, the person must have knowledge. The person must know for a fact that what this person is doing is wrong. Including in knowledge, and I've put it as a separate one, but including in knowledge, the ulama have said, you must also know the state of the person. Okay? So I'm walking, for example, with, and this actually happened to me once, I was walking with a young girl, a young woman, because she's a woman, and somebody said to me, or somebody looked at me and said that she's not dressed inappropriately. What are you doing with her? You give a khutbah and you lead the salah. And what are you doing standing with somebody like that? She's not dressed appropriately. That was my niece. And I can't force her to wear it. I'm not going to force her to wear it. It was the day of Eid. And we went to the park together. And I can't, that's my niece. I'm not going to tell her you have to wear the hijab. I'm not going to say that, look, I've got nothing to do with you. Stand over there, walk separately. So now this person who's saying these things, maybe he has a right. He has got knowledge, but he doesn't know the situation. So knowing the state of the affairs is very, very important before you try and rectify and before you try and discuss. You must also know the different opinions. Now this has happened to me also, and it actually happened to me last week, where a person, throughout the salat, I'm sure you guys can relate to this, I'm standing there, literally like every few seconds he's like this, like that, tapping me, yeah? So I look down, and what he wants me to do is go back a bit more. So I went back, fair enough, went back. I put my foot out, and it wasn't far enough, and I'm not going to stand in a way that's not comfortable for me. I made it available for him, but he wanted me to go out more to him and go back at the same time. So I adjusted myself, and I carried, and I'm listening to the Imam now, and continues. Yeah, it continues. Get into ruku', and he's playing with his foot. He's like this, putting his foot up and down, like he's showing me his foot. Yeah? You've probably seen that he's curling his toes. Yeah, and he carried on and carried on. I thought at the end of the salah, this guy's he's gonna bite my ear off. But he looked at me and he thought, oh, this guy's the. Sorry, he got off. Knowing the opinions is very important. Look, I'm trying to pray. I'm trying to listen to what the Imam is saying. And you're worried about my foot. And you're worried about your own foot. Is that the objective of salah? Even if that is your opinion, there is another opinion. And there is another situation. What they are calling to must actually be a confliction. And this is kind of like similar to what we've just said here. What I've done is not actually a confliction to the Sharia. Because I'm trying to preserve the essence of my salat. Not worry about other people's feet. But he obviously thought so that this is what he should be doing. So he's trying to correct me whilst we are praying, but it's not actually a confliction. You see the point that's being made here? You must be also able to change. Now this is very important. I actually want to put that there. It's kind of related anyway. That if you see, for example, people worshipping other than Allah, or they're celebrating celebrations that we don't agree with, you don't make it an issue. If you're not able to change it, then you don't change it. You can't change it. Then Islam doesn't want you to change and challenge. It wants you to give nasiha. It wants you to explain what you think is right. But you don't. Ability is very, very important. And if you don't have that ability, then what you could end up doing is number 7. And Islam pays heavy emphasis on something which would lead to a greater difficulty and a greater harm. There's a man who came into the masjid, and a brother told me that this guy, he basically follows a kind of Islam where they make dua to the Prophet ﷺ and those kind of things. So he came into our masjid and he's praying, and he's now gradually coming to our masjid. He came one day and he had an England football t-shirt on. So the other brother says to me, you know that brother there, he's going to pray his salah and he's actually got a cross on his t-shirt. What do you do in that scenario? What would you do, Sajid? Let it go? Or go and give him advice and say, bro, don't wear that, don't come to our masjid. Doesn't make sense, does it? That's going to create a greater harm. Let him keep coming. I believe he even comes for the khutbahs because they're in English. That is good. If you start insulting and if you start putting people off, again, there's a level of ability, but also you have to weigh up the affairs. Nabi, what question?
Can you elaborate on what you mean by ability, please?
What's that? All of that?
No. Ability, the word there. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Ability is that you're able to do it. If you don't have knowledge, if you don't have physical ability, if you don't have the power or the authority, the Prophet ﷺ said, if you see something wrong, change it with your hand. If you can't, you're not able, with your tongue. If you are not able, just know that it's wrong. That's it. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to ask, regarding the brother you were in the salah with and he tapped his foot, could you see why he was concerned? Because, just previously you stated the hadith about straightening your lines so we remain unified.
Yes.
So, in that instance, is it more...
The point that I'm making here is that he thinks the line is not straight, whereas I feel that it is. That's the point that I'm making. Now, I believe that I was in line. I wouldn't obviously optionally or consciously stand out of line. And I stood as close as I could to him. But he wanted more from me. And I didn't want to give that more. I wanted to concentrate on my prayer. So that's the point that I'm trying to make here. Not that the hukum is different. It's the way that he was applying the hukum. When does a person leave Ahl Sunnah? If I follow a particular sheikh and you follow a different sheikh, does that make me not follow Ahl Sunnah? Maybe, maybe not. If I did a particular practice, if I celebrated the Prophet's birthday, would I leave Ahl Sunnah or would I not? No? If I was to do an act of Allah protect us, if a person was to do an act of shirk, would he then leave Allah? What is the right and what is the wrong? Because we have to remember now we're talking about those people who follow the Sunnah, like we've seen before. They are the people that are upon guidance. They are the people who are balanced. They are those people who are preserving their deeds. They are the people who are, seeking enrichment through all those things that we've just looked at. So that means these are the people that you need to, to be with. Otherwise, you're going to fall into liberalism or extremism, and you're not going to be on the right path. But then, how do you know that you're from that sect or that group of people?
Those other, if he doesn't follow the Sunnah, he opposes the Sunnah, he make innovations.
Okay, good. Okay. What does it mean though? But what does it mean to follow? When a person makes following the Quran and the Sunnah with the understanding of the earliest generations, the way the companions understood it, how the Imams understood it, then he's on the right way. And inevitably, there's going to be difference of opinions. That is, he follows one opinion, he looks at another hadith, and we understand different hadith different ways. That doesn't take a person outside of Ahl Sunnah. What would take you outside of Ahl Sunnah is when you say, I don't need to follow the Quran, I don't need to follow the Sunnah, and I don't need to follow that understanding from that early generation. I'm actually quite happy reading this book. Even though there's many conflictions, or it's been pointed out to you, I think that might be wrong. No, I'm actually quite happy with this. Or my family follow this. Or we go to a particular masjid. Or my dad told me to do it this way. Or a sheikh or Maulana told me to do it this way. And this is what I'm happy with. If a person is happy in leaving when the Quran is presented to him, or when the Sunnah is presented to him, and especially when we are presenting views from scholars, early scholars, then that would take a person outside the correct and the balanced way. If a person was to do one action would that take him out of Ahl Sunnah? Not necessarily, but could be. If a person was to do an act of shirk, then obviously he'd be outside of Ahl Sunnah. But if a person, like I was saying just before, if he practiced the milad, or if he venerated the Ashura, like the way certain sects do, would that take the person out of Ahl Sunnah? The ulama have said it can be even just one aspect taking him out of Ahl Sunnah. It could just be one aspect which takes him out of Ahl Sunnah. If he is allying himself with a group which is not with the Quran and the Sunnah, even one aspect, then he would take him outside Ahl Sunnah. Why? Because he is not following the correct understanding and methodology in understanding the religion. That could even just be one aspect. Knowingly, wholeheartedly rejecting the Quran and Sunnah. One aspect could do that. And here we have some quotes.
Sorry, what's that layman? You know, the layman and he believes this is according to.
That's good, I was just about to mention that. These people are known as the people of desires. And a lot of the ulama have referred to those people who innovate into the religion as being the people of desires. And desires here doesn't mean desires referring to your sinful and whimsical desires. It means desires in the sense that you are trying to manipulate the religion in a way that you think fits for you. Not necessarily what the Quran and the Sunnah says, but in a way that culturally maybe, or an idea maybe, and typically it's an idea. The people of desires, typically it's an idea. For example, I can maybe not even pray and still be a Muslim. Or a person can go into extremes and say, well, if you don't believe that there is worldwide war, then you are like them and we're going to kill you and we're going to kill your country as well. That is a person of desire. This is what it refers to. Now, what Imam al-Shatibi said is that those people who are the people of desire are those people who knowingly are going against the Quran and the Sunnah with that correct understanding. But it can also be a lay person who blindly follows, and he follows that person or that view, and he wants to cling on to that view. Even when you present to him that, look, brother, I think you're making a very big mistake here. Look, here's the Quran, here's the Sunnah. This is what all these scholars have said. This is why I think you are wrong. No, don't talk to me about this. I think Amjad Chaudhry is a really good man. That would make him a person of desire, even if he's not a scholar. However, the general rule is, if a person makes a mistake and he's gone against the Quran and the Sunnah and he doesn't know, then he is not from Ahl Sunnah, but he may not be sinful. So what do we say about the common person who celebrates the Mawlid or goes and does certain practices which are against the Sunnah? We will say he's not Ahl Sunnah because he admits that he's not Ahl Sunnah and he's not following the way of Ahl Sunnah. Is he sinful? We don't know. If he was negligent and he was able to find out but he was negligent, then yes, he will be sinful. Of course he will be. The Quran is there, the Sunnah is there. Allah's going to ask him, didn't my message come to you? Wasn't it available for you? Of course it was. You didn't find out. That's your fault. But if a person genuinely thinks that he's doing what is right and he thinks that he has the information that he needs to please Allah, like we saw in the ayah of Imtihan, then maybe he might not be sinful. It is possible. Shall we carry on or should we stop? How long have we gone for? It's been about an hour. Yeah, okay. So what we're going to do now is the next following chapters are actually going to follow on from that, which is looking at how to create a good legacy for yourself. And this stems on from the Prophet ﷺ leaving a legacy behind for himself, which is the Sunnah. And the Prophet ﷺ, as we will see from next week's hadith, is saying that if you were to change something in your life and continue in that, and then all those people who follow you in that, then you will get that multiplication in reward. And we look at that a bit more further. And that obviously involves looking at enjoying good and forbidding evil and all these other things. So ask Allah to give us life and give us the ability to benefit from this book and make it as a blessing for us and our lives. Anybody got any questions?
Yes, please.
Yes. Or is that a private question?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know,
I didn't see
let
that.
everyone go first now.
Anybody got any questions related to the lesson?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you were talking